Authoritarianism. Authoritarianism is a political system characterized by the reduction of political authority, the use of strong central power to preserve the political status, and reductions in the rule of law, separation of powers, and democratic voting. In 1965, Ferdinand A. Marcos was elected president, and in 1967, Philippine Congress passed a resolution calling for a constitutional convention to change the 1925 Constitution. Marcos won the re-election in 1969 in a bid boosted by campaign overspending and use of government funds. Held on November 20, 1970, and the convention began formally on June 1, 1971, with former President Carlos P. Garcia being elected as convention president. Unfortunately, he died and was succeeded by another former president, Diosdado Macapagal, before the convention finished its words. Martial law was decreed. Marcos cited a growing communist insurgency as reason for the martial law, which was provided in the with Marcos as dictator, the direction of the convention turned with accounts that the president himself dedicated some provisions of the constitutions, manipulating the document to be able to hold on to power for as long as he will. On November 29, 1972, the convention approved its proposed constitution. The constitution was supposed to introduce a parliamentary-style government, where legislative power was vested in a unicameral National Assembly, with members being elected to a 6-year term. The president was to be elected as the symbolic and ceremonial head of state chosen from the members of the National Assembly. The president would serve a 6-year term and could be re-elected to an unlimited number of terms. Executive power was relegated to the Prime Minister, who was also the head of government and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Force, who was also to be selected from the National Assembly. The Constitution was amended several times. In 1976, citizen assemblies once again decided to allow the continuation of martial law as well as approve the amendments and interim batasang pambansa to substitute for the interim National Assembly. The President also became the Prime Minister and continued to exercise legislative powers until martial law was lifted and authorized the President to legislate on his own. After all the amendments introduced, the 1970 Constitution was merely a way for the President to keep executive powers, abolish the Senate, and by any means never acted as a parliamentary system. Instead, functions an authoritarian presidential system, with all the real power concentrated in the hands of the President. With the backing of the Constitution, after all the amendments introduced, the situation in the 1980s had been very turbulent. As Marcos amassed powers, discontent has also been forgone. The tide turned swiftly when in August 1983, Benigno Aquino Jr., opposition leader and regarded as the most credible alternative to President Marcos, was assassinated while under military escort immediately after his return from exile in the United States. There was widespread suspicion that the orders to assassinate Aquino came from the top levels of the government and the military. This event caused the coming together of the nonviolent opposition against the Marcos authoritarian regime. Marcos was then forced to hold snap elections a year early, and said elections were marred by widespread fraud. Marcos declared himself winner despite international condemnation and nationwide protests. A small group of military rebels attempted to stage a coup but failed. However, this triggered what came to be known as the EDSA People Power Revolution of 1986, as people from all walks of life spilled onto the street. His opponent in this election, Benigno Aquino Jr.'s widow, Corazon Aquino, was installed as president on February 25, 1986. That's all. Thank you.
1987 Constitutional after martial law. President Corazon Aquino's government had 3 options regarding the Constitution: revert to the 1935 Constitution, retain the 1973 Constitution, and be granted the power to make reform to start anew and break from the vestiges of the disgraced dictatorship. Aquino's government decided to make a new Constitution that should be truly reflective of the inspiration and ideas of the Filipino people. In March 1986, President Aquino proclaimed a transitional constitution to last for a year, while a constitutional commission drafted a permanent constitution. transitional constitution called the Freedom Constitution, maintained many provisions of the old one, including in the rewritten form the presidential right to rule by decree. In 1986, a constitutional change convention was created, composed of 48 members appointed by President Aquino from varied background and representation. The convention drew up a permanent constitution, largely restoring the setup abolished by Marcos in 1972, with new ways to keep a president in check. In reaction to the experience of Marcos' rule, the new constitution was officially adopted in February 2, 1987. The Constitution began with the preamble and 18 self-contained articles. It established the Philippines as a democratic republic state where sovereignty resides in the people and all government authority emanates from them. It allocates governmental powers among the executive, legislative, and judicial branches of the government. The executive branch is headed by the president and his cabinet, whom he appoints. The president is the head of the state and the chief executive, but his power is limited by the significant check from the two other co-equal branches of government, especially during times of emergency. This is put in place to safeguard the country from the experience of martial law, despotism during the presidency of Marcos. In case of national emergency, the president may still declare martial law, but not longer than a period of 60 days. Congress, through a majority vote, can revoke this decision or extend it for a period that be determined. The Supreme Court may also review the declaration of martial law and decide if there were sufficient satisfying facts for the act. The President and the Vice President are elected at large by direct vote, serving a single 6-year term. The legislative power resides in the Congress, divided into two houses, the Senate, which composed of 24 senators that are elected at large by popular vote and can serve no more than 2 consecutive 6-year terms, and the House of Representatives composed of district representatives representing a particular geographic area and makes up around 80% of the total number of representatives. There are 234 legislative districts in the Philippines that elect the representative to serve 3-year term. The 1987 Constitution created a party system to provide space for the participation of underrepresented community sectors or group. Party-list representatives may fill up not more than 20% of the seats in the House. Aside from the exclusive power of legislation, Congress may also declare war through a 2/3 vote in both upper and lower houses. The power of legislation, however, is also subject to an executive check, as the President retains the power to veto or stop a bill from becoming a law. Congress may only override this power with a 2/3 vote in the both houses. The Philippine court system is vested with the power of the judiciary and is composed of the Supreme Court and lower court as created by law. The Supreme Court is 15-member court appointed by the President without the need to be confirmed by the Congress. The appointment the President makes, however, is limited to a list of nominees provided by a constitutionally specified judiciary bar council. The Supreme Court Justice may hear on appeal any cases dealing with the constitutionality of any law, treaty, or decree, or the government cases where questions of the jurisdiction or judicial error are concerned, or cases where the penalty is sufficiently grave. It may also exercise original jurisdiction over cases involving government or international cooperation. The Supreme Court is also in charge of overseeing the functioning and administration of the lower courts and their personnel. The Constitution also established 3 independent constitutional commissions, namely the Civil Service Commission, a central agency in charge of government personnel. The Commission on Elections mandated to enforce and administer all election laws and regulations, and the Commission on Audit, which examined all funds, transactions, and property action of the government and its agency. To further promote the ethical and lawful conduct of the government, the Office of the Ombudsman was created to investigate complaints that pertains to public corruption, unlawful behavior of the public official, and other public misconduct. The Ombudsman can charge public official before the Sandigan Bayan, a special court created for this purpose. Changing the Constitution is a perennial issue that crops up. The terms such as Chacha, Con-as, and Con are regularly thrown around. Article 17 of the 1987 Constitution provides for three ways by which the Constitution can be changed. First method, Congress may convene as a constituent assembly to propose amendments to Constitution. Another method is through the Constitutional Convention, where Congress, upon a vote of two-thirds of all its members, calls for Constitutional Convention. The third method is called the People Initiative. In this method, amendments to the Constitution may be proposed by the people upon a petition of at least 12% of the total number of registered voters. Only the House of Representatives can initiate the impeachment of the President, member of the Supreme Court, and other constitutionally protected public officials such as the Ombudsman. The Senate will then try the impeachment case. This is another safeguard to promote moral and ethical conduct in the government.
Attempts to amend or change the 1987 Constitution. The second effort happened in 1997 when a group called PIRMA or PIRMA hoped to gather signatures from voters to change the Constitution through a people's initiative. This was succeeding President Joseph Ejercito Estrada formed a study commission to investigate the issues surrounding character change, focusing on the economic and judicial. After President Estrada was replaced by another people power and succeeded by his Vice President Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo, then House Speaker Jose de Venecia endorsed constitutional change through a constituent assembly, which entails a two-thirds vote of the House to propose amendments or revision to the Constitution. Who attempted to introduce amendment to that Constitution that concerned economic provisions that aim toward liberalization. Federalism in the Philippines was supported by President Duterte in the 2016 presidential elections, saying that it will evenly distribute wealth in the Philippines instead of concentrating it in Manila, the capital of the country. As a form of government, the central governing authority and constituent political units constitutionally share sovereignty in this system. It is possible for the central government and the regions to share certain powers. Any effort to shift the system of government also entail costs, and it would not be cheap. On 7 December 2006, President Duterte signed an executive order creating a consultative committee to review the 1987 Constitution.